Listening to Peace Talks on Life Conversations Radio with your host Audri Scott Williams. We are overcoming a few little technical glitches here and there, but nevertheless, nothing can stop Peace Talks on Life Conversations Radio, coming to you live from our walk across America on the 13 Moon Walk for Peace. This is your host Audri Scott Williams, and thank you, Ade, thank you, Tony, for keeping the show moving forward. We have a very fantastic guest today as I'm looking across the table at a fellow walker who I'm extremely proud of. You had a chance to hear from him, I think, about 1 or 2 shows ago. In Houston, we met a young man by the name of Noah. And it was interesting because when we came into Houston, I kept getting a call from my friend PK saying, you got to meet Noah. You just got to meet Noah. And I'm saying, okay, I can't wait to meet Noah. But as you had a chance to hear a little bit about him last week, Noah is a young man. He'll be celebrating 33 soon. That's a very significant time in a person's life. I can tell you that's when I had a heart attack at 33. But Noah is, I would say, as I think about Noah and things that have come to me since I've met you, Noah, I think of you of a man of, you're not always who you seem to be. Noah is a graduate of Prairie View here in Texas with a degree in physics and mechanical engineering. And but he decided to put all that behind him for a moment to walk a walk from Houston to Los Angeles to bring awareness to the homeless. So Noah, why don't we start there? Because I can imagine when you announced that that's what you were going to do, it must have raised several eyebrows. I would imagine in your family, your friends, your community. So tell me what inspired you to do that walk, and whether you think you accomplished what you set out to do. And being a fellow walker, the question that also I think resides in all of us is the work continuing? How is that walk now driving you?
My inspiration came from my time out at Prairie View. It's a two-sided story. One side is the act of walking itself, and the other side is the intent behind the walk. Now, the act of walking, I fell in love with while I was at Prairie View. Studying, moving from one place to another, it was more cost-effective to just walk to class. Eventually, that found me walking 5-10 miles a day from one town to the next one. And I just gained a really deep appreciation for it, the way it connects you to the place that you're in. And I'm all about investigating my potential. I'm about investigating all of our potential collectively, and that is something that I figured need more investigation. So it'd be a good way to dig deeply into that. Around the homeless issue, I started volunteering with the homeless in 2005, and I was doing this so I can learn a little bit more about the realities of mental illness. Just trying to figure out how mental illness played itself out in the human experience in day-to-day life for normal people who couldn't afford to have really high cost, expensive help. And so did a little research and found out then that a lot of people who had different types of mental illnesses either wound up locked up in prison or wound up being homeless on the streets. And those who are in prison wind up on the streets as well. So it'll be a good place to go see it firsthand and just kind of gain a real world understanding of it, not necessarily from a technical aspect. And so I started volunteering. And when I was volunteering, the idea of all of my preconceptions started to disappear. Because before that time, I've always been a caring person. That's how I was raised. My parents were caring. All my brothers and sisters, we love each other. We've always done stuff out in the community. But there's always limits to everything. And before that time, I noticed, after I started volunteering, I noticed the difference in how I felt before as to how I felt afterwards. And what happened was I feel like I was like most other people. When a homeless person was in my space, or if I was passing through their space, I would just ignore them. and there's a tendency to act as if they weren't there. And I think that gives, perceptually, it gives them an essence of invisibility.
Yes.
And it became really apparent. It's like a veil was lifted off of my eyes. And I understood that's what I was doing before. And I started to talk to people about some of the things that I learned. At that point in time, 49% of the homeless population was African American, but we were only 13% of the population. The fastest growing group of homeless individuals were women at that point in time. And in the state of Texas, the average age of a homeless person was 11 years old. Nationally, the percentage of homeless people under 18 is 40%. So out of that 3.5 million, almost half of that were children.
That's right.
And you don't see that.
Let me stop you there, because that's a really good point. You know, we think about how we're living in one of the richest countries in the world, and we have a lifestyle that is quite extravagant when you compare it to the rest of the world. And half the children on this planet, over 1 billion children, are homeless and live in poverty. You know, when you think about that, that's on a worldwide scale. But in the richest country in the world, our percentage of children who are homeless, who are below the poverty line, and families below the poverty line is astounding. And I encourage anyone, there are several areas that you can go to for some statistics. If you really want to open your eyes, go to the Urban League's website, go to Global Issues website, and familiarize yourself. And there's so many other. Go to your own state statistics and look at your poverty rates in your community. And the reason I say that, Noah, is I find that it's real easy to not see.
Right.
You know, whether we're talking about homelessness, whether we're talking about imprisonment in this country, whether we're talking about unemployed, whether we're talking about poverty issues, in general. I mean, look at the number of families now that are not getting enough to eat. They just published it, and I don't have it right in front of me. There was this publication that was done that looks at the number of families now who are undernourished. And I'm talking about in our country. Right. And so in the time that you started walking, it was before the economic downswing.
Everything was good then.
All right.
Right. Yeah. And there's when we say that we're the richest country in the world, why is it that? There's a gift and a curse to the idea, to the concept of perception is reality. We can live in a reality and perceive ourselves to be in another one.
That's right.
And that's so often the case. It's easy, it's a motivating at times, and it's a handicap at other times. And the state of the United States, even if it is the richest country in the world, the country itself, looking at it from a realistic point of view, as far as just what the perception of the United States is, there's still a lot of people in poverty. So that's a great testament to the rest of the world.
Exactly.
How if this is the richest country in the world, how's it being played out everywhere else? Now, just because it's not necessarily a thing of money, it's more a thing of intent and a sense of collective responsibility. Because I've heard the story told a couple of times about people who went down to Cuba and they don't understand the concept of homelessness per se, because it's not set up the way it is here. And homelessness is actually a new phenomenon the way it is here in the United States. 60 years ago, 80 years ago, the country was more rural, there was less of an issue. Because our mentality, our sense of collective responsibility was different. Families were larger, the family unit was more important. And now that we've moved to a more commoditized system where each individual input is directed towards the growth of the economy.
Exactly. Consumerism.
Right,
Let's name
exactly.
it. Consumerism.
They
you gotta have the biggest, the most, the newest, whatever it is.
My dad brought to my attention a couple years ago. He said, "Pay attention. They don't call us citizens anymore. They call us consumers."
Yeah. And the thing about that, you know, we were riding down, I think I was in the car with Baba one day, and we saw all these storage facilities. And I was saying, Baba, isn't it interesting that we're so into consumerism that we fill our house, and when that can't hold all of our stuff, we go out and rent a facility to store the stuff that we don't use anymore, but it's still our stuff.
Right.
And then when that gets full, we go get another storage facility. So now we got our stuff in our home, our stuff that we don't really use anymore, and then we got the stuff that we really don't use anymore, but it's all ours, and we're keeping it close, and we're paying a dear price
It's
for it.
mine.
It's mine. It's mine.
Right.
It's an interesting phenomena.